Hello everyone, today we are going to look at some of the best opening traps that you can play against your opponents and beat them in the first 6 moves of the game. Now, as good as it sounds, it actually is good, and this is no joke. However, one thing that we need to keep in mind is our opponent needs to play a specific set of moves in order to ensure that they fall into the trap. It is not always going to happen. It entirely depends on if your opponent has knowledge of chess theory or not. If they do, well, you are in trouble because you need tactical knowledge in order to proceed in the game. However, if they don't, then you are going to seriously give these beginners a hard time. So let's get into it. The first trap that we are going to look at is in the most popular opening of all time, the Queen's Gambit. Recently there was a Netflix series with that name, and I'm pretty sure most of you would be aware of that name. So this is how it goes. It goes d4, d5, c4, gambiting the c4 pawn to black. Now black has two options. He can defend the position going with the queen's gambit declined, or he can capture this pawn and take the risk and basically invite the white pieces to take over the center and do what they can. It's basically an open challenge. However, there is an amazing trap that people fall for every single day. Now, how do I know this? Well, I've basically gotten a lot of beginners to fall into this trap, and whenever you are playing against beginners, they will generally fall for this trap in like out of 10 you basically find like 5 matches where your opponents will fall for this, and it's no joke. It's one of the best traps ever. So the opponent takes the c4 pawn because they're a beginner and they don't know how to play the queen's gambit declined, so they basically take it thinking it's a free pawn, but it's definitely not. Now we're going to play e3. Now e3 is an amazing move because first of all it activates this diagonal for the queen and opens an attack on this pawn from the bishop. Now another move in this position is e4, which is positionally better for white, but we need to make sure that our opponent falls in the trap. For that, e3 is important, and we open the path for the bishop to capture this pawn. So our opponent, since he's a beginner, is basically going to play b5 to defend this c4 pawn and hang on to the pawn that he just won a few seconds ago. We are going to make time tough for this guy and play a4. This is basically refuting the presence of the b5 pawn. Now, the move a6 and c6 are the two moves that come to the mind of a beginner. I know that because I've been in that place before. In fact, I've fallen into this trap once, but not after that. So a6 is basically useless because if you play a6 you capture, and in case you decide to recapture, the rook captures the rook and you're basically lost. However, the second move c6 is not a good move either, because the moment you see c6 you know that your opponent is going to lose this match. So takes, and the absolutely stunning queen f3 that you would have seen in the thumbnail of this video. Now queen f3 opens an attack against this rook, and there is no way to preserve material for black. There is a way to reduce the material loss, but there is no way to guard the material in this position. It's the beauty of this trap that there's an open diagonal and it's impossible to defend it. So knight to c6 is the move that your opponent is going to play. If he's tactically good, he just did not have enough theoretical knowledge and fell for this trap. In that case, you're going to take this knight, happily be up material. According to the engine, this is around plus 4.8 in this position, and I'm pretty sure even beginners can win this match. If they don't have a lot of knowledge of chess theory, they can easily continue this match and win it. So once you've won this, you've basically won the match, right? However, Like I said, this is the move that your opponent is going to play when he sees that captures and bishop blocks opens a protection to the rook. However, a lot of beginners will not be able to see that. They see that the queen is directly attacking the rook and there's no way to defend it. Now, they will get seriously annoyed, they will get hopeless, and they will blunder. They can play a move like knight here or knight here, basically giving away this rook. And in that case, you're just going to pick it up and be up a whole rook for a pawn. This is plus 6.8 in terms of the engine evaluation, and you basically won the match. Moving on to trap number 2, we are going to look at the fried liver attack. Now, as amazing as this name sounds, it's actually even better when it comes to real play. E4, E5, knight F3, knight C6, and bishop to C4. This is called the Italian opening. It basically focuses on the weak F7 pawn of the black king, and it's pretty amazing, basically, in simple words. So what is the opponent going to do? He's going to play knight f6, basically trying to attack this pawn in the center. Now, what are the two instincts that come to the mind of any person? They are d3 or knight to c3. Both are really good moves, but these are the kind of moves that you play when you're in a tournament. But when you're going to smash some beginners right in the face, you're going to play the move knight to g5, which gives a double attack to this pawn. And life is really hard here for black. There's only one move which guards the match and makes sure that black does not lose immediately. And I'm pretty sure you can guess it if you've seen this before, but a lot of people will find it hard to guess it if they are playing a blitz match and they've never seen this position before. So the move that saves it all is d5 and pawn takes. Now, say you're in a rapid match and you manage to find this move. Your next instinct would be to recapture the pawn, which is again a mistake. Because if you capture this pawn, you are inviting the fried liver attack, which is going to be played by capturing the f7 pawn. You recapture with the king and queen f3. Now, if you go back, we are going to recapture the knight, be a pawn up, and you have lost the right to castle. So, queen to e6 is the only move which preserves the knight temporarily. But knight to c3, and there's just too much pressure for black to handle. Eventually, the knight will fall, and things will be really bad here. But moving on to the trap in this position, which comes with e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop to c4, and knight f6 and knight to g5. Say your opponent does not play the move d5 and he just couldn't figure it out what to do in this position, and he decides to just play a normal move like h6. Now, this is something a lot of beginners will play. They're unable to distinguish between the threats. They see that the knight is coming forward and they need to kick it back, but they fail to understand the motive behind putting this knight here. So we're going to capture the pawn on f7, forking the queen and the rook, and basically black is losing material here and eventually the match. Now, it's useless to tell a trap if I don't tell you how to defend against this. So after knight g5, d4, you don't capture back with this knight. That's going to be a mistake. You're going to play knight to a5, threaten to capture this bishop. And that is exactly how you save this position. Bishop check, pawn moves, pawn takes, and the move queen to f3 is the continuation in this position, which is all very, very common And most people would have seen it if they know chess openings. However, if you don't, well, this is something you need to look forward to. This is how you continue your attack if you are white in this Italian game. And it's basically completely zero point 0.0 according to the engine evaluation. It's a drawn match, but only if black knows how to play further. Like he can go bishop to e7 and castle to save this match, but if he makes some mistakes, like say he goes back with the knight, loses this pawn and the knight, there's going to be a lot of trouble. You can expect such kind of things from beginners, and that's the whole motive of creating this video. Moving on to trap number 3, we are going to look at the Albin counter gambit. Now this is the real deal here. It's one of the most amazing traps that black can play against white. Now the two traps I just showed were basically white crushing black in the opening, but this one is where black gets the job done. So we play d4, d5, c4, and e5. If you've never seen it before, you'll be like, what the hell is this? He's just giving away an e5 pawn, and basically he might lose the match, because what comes to mind is we capture and he captures, we recapture the queen and just go e4 and capture this pawn later on in the game. That's what comes to mind, but that's not the motive of the move e5. Now obviously the best move is to capture the pawn, but we need to know the correct continuation in order to not lose here. So pawn takes and pawn to d4 is how the match progresses. Now this is a very strong pawn, to be honest. There is nothing that attacks it, and the beginner mind is going to think of somehow removing this pawn and enjoying the extra pawn that we just won. So the move e3 is very, very common. It just comes right into the mind. It's very instinctive, and we play it immediately a lot of times without thinking twice. Now, it's okay from the looks of it, but to the untrained eye, this might be okay, but the moment you realize there's an amazing bishop check here that basically makes use of this open diagonal. Now, playing the knight here is not possible, right? The knight being played here is just, it's very ugly, because pawn takes the knight, and it just makes no sense to give away a free knight. Playing the move knight to d2 makes a little bit of sense, but we don't like the fact that pawn captures and pawn captures, and we've got two isolated double pawns. So what is it that we're going to do? The most obvious move, according to white, will be to block with the bishop. It just seems that we're attacking the bishop, he recaptures, we recapture, and it's an equal game after that. Well, that is only if the motive is to capture the bishop. The motive is not to capture the bishop. The motive is to capture the pawn. Now, this bishop is pinned to the king, so it cannot retake it. You get the point? It cannot recapture the pawn because of the pin. And a lot of beginners, again, will get greedy here. They'll see that the opponent blundered. He just forgot that the bishop was hanging. They will capture this bishop. And now we don't go after taking the queen, we capture this pawn. Now if king captures the pawn, we just pick up the queen, and we won the match basically by giving away just a bishop. However, if king does not capture, which is the most obvious move, and he moves the king up, because that is the only square where the king can go while defending the queen, we capture the knight and we promote to a knight. Now this is the beauty of this trap. When we promote to a knight, we make sure that there's a check. This checks the king and forces him to recapture the knight, because anywhere the king moves, it's basically inviting trouble, right? Now, once rook captures the knight, we are not going to immediately recapture the queen, because that just makes no sense. What's the whole point? We are going to throw in this bishop check, king moves, and we are going to capture this queen and make life a living hell for for white here. So we just saw how hard things can get in these positions, and the most obvious moves basically cause us a loss in the match. So we are going to make sure that we don't lose. So how to prevent against all of this? Well, I have that ready. d4, d5, c4, and e5. You're going to capture the pawn. And now the best move would be to play knight to f3, which attacks this pawn. The opponent will defend it, and you're going to play a3. Now there is no check from the bishop. First things first, right? Now in this position, even e3 is not a bad move. In fact, it would be a good move. You are basically forcing him to capture this time. So once this is done, you can see that this position is okay. In fact, it is slightly better for white because white knew how to take advantage of this position. It's plus 0.8. You can round it off to almost. It's like the pawn you just won is better. But the whole point of black in this position is to bring this knight here and target this pawn and recapture it. 99% of the times black is going to win back this pawn, but that's not the whole point. The point is that black is wasting a lot of moves in order to get back a pawn that he lost, and white is going to use that gain time to gain activity and eventually win the match. So this is a very decent opening that you can add to your repertoire and surprise your opponents because they might not have seen it coming. So that was it for today's video. I hope you liked these 3 traps. I covered basically the most classical traps today, and eventually we will be indulging ourselves into the more deeper traps. But the whole point is that the deeper we get into the match, the less are the chances for our opponent to fall into a trap. So we covered the Queen's Gambit's most classic trap line, the fried liver attack, and the Albin counter gambit. And I hope you guys liked the repertoire I just shared with you. And make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. There will be more chess traps and openings coming in the future. That's it. Thanks a lot.